Are Lenhan and Coralie truly victims of their situation, or are they to blame for all the harm that they've caused?
Hi, my name's Alexis Suarez, and today for our podcast, Literary Corner, I'll be joined by my co-speakers.
My name is Lorena Rios.
Hi, my name's Rosa Perez.
And I'm Johnny Rivera.
So today we're going to continue our series talking about Dubliners, the collection of short stories made by James Joyce. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the Two Gallants story. So Rosa, do you want to go into the summary that we're going to do before the analysis?
Of course. So the Two Gallants is based in Dublin. As you can see, I'm right now in the streets of Dublin. So that's where we start off. That's where we start off with the two main characters, Lenihan and Corley. They are seen walking around talking about this mysterious plan that they have with a maid. We don't know what the plan is or what they are going to do, but we know that they are on their way to meet with her. So Corley can go on a date and Lenihan waits for whatever they're going to do to happen. So once Corley finally meets with the maid, Lenihan goes on his own and starts walking around the streets of Dublin. We get more of an introduction to his actual character. He seems that he's guilty about the things that he's doing. He wants a better life for himself and wants to try to change. So then finally, after that little short sequence, he finally meets back with Corley and
we see the maid. He watches the maid go into this house and come back out and hand something to Coralie. And after that, Coralie sneaks away and it's revealed to be a coin. So the plot that they were having was him stealing something from her employer, basically. That's the story.
Does this coin mean something? That's the question.
It does mean something, but I think before we get into that, we should first establish the fact that throughout the entire analysis that we're going to get into now, we're going to be talking about themes of misogyny, betrayal, and just transactional relationships. Am I missing anything? No? Okay, perfect.
Struggle of poverty too, I would say.
Poverty? Okay, yeah. So you wanted to talk about the coin first, or do you think we should talk about the title?
Well, I think the title gives like way to why the coin is important, right?
Okay.
So the title is ironic because during this period and still now, Two Gallants is known to be two chivalrous men. And in our story, we have Lenihan and Corley, but we realize that they're not very chivalrous, are they?
No, they're the complete opposite.
They're quite the opposite, yeah. So throughout the story, it's really obvious through their conversations, and especially the ending with the coin, that they make a living off of taking advantage of women, you know? So they talk about having done this multiple times, and it's very obvious that they've done this before in the way that they talk about, like, you don't think I can do this. I've done this before. You know I can do it, right?
Right. So likewise, when Corley discusses the plan to exploit the woman, they refer to her as the slavey, which is slang for this period as well, because it really shows like their true nature. They're manipulators. They have some type of like moral ambiguity, because who actually calls these maids the slavey? It shows their true intentions aren't just, oh, we're trying to get away with, or we're trying to be nice with her, but in reality, they're manipulating her in more ways than one.
Yeah, and I think that that obviously very much ties into the misogynistic themes we were talking about earlier, and you also really see that when Coralie is talking about his past relationships with women and how he used to care about the women and he used to do all these things for him, but how he doesn't really feel the need to do that anymore.
Yeah, and then Lenihan also kind of follows him. It's kind of shown that he's dismissive towards him. And Coralie is kind of like the one that follows in with Lenihan. So yeah.
So I think Rosa, you said that you wanted to talk something about the moon.
Yeah, so basically the moon motif, it first comes up when Lenihan is looking up at the moon and it has double halos, it's very bright. But then in the next page, he looks at it again and it says that it is quote unquote veiled now. So that kind of represents how their intentions with this plan with this maid are not good. They're not good intentions. They're trying to like trick her or like use her for something else.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I feel like that's the first indication of them not being particularly good people that we get, I would say. I mean, you kind of see it before in their language, but that's the first time that you really see where it's like, whoa, you know, these aren't good people.
Yeah, we really get to see the type of people that they are, how manipulative they are in nature, how they're willing to. And before, Corley mentioned how the maid showed signs of attraction towards him, and he really used that in his favor to manipulate her, to get her to steal from her boss.
Yeah. And I think something else that's important to note, kind of moving away from the misogynistic notes, is between Coralie and Lenehan's relationship within itself, and how Coralie is this kind of dominating character, and Lenehan, although he seems to believe himself to be like a leader, kind of just falls behind him. And I think that's really seen in the continuous mention of Lenehan being pushed to the side off the road, right?
Very clear that Corley, in this friendship that they have together, Corley is the dominant figure and Lenehan is the more submissive figure, as he just listens to what Corley has to say and he just follows along.
Yeah.
And I would actually say that this kind of behavior they follow is kind of like Lenehan's own paralysis, because as we mentioned, Corley is the dominant one, and then Lenehan is just looking for some type of reasoning in his life. He's kind of stuck with Corley because he has no other option, whether it be finances or potentially like purpose in life. It kind of becomes like this metaphor for paralysis, because in the Irish society that they found themselves stuck in, what is Lenehan gonna do? His only option is to follow Corley. He's paralyzed in a situation.
Yeah, of course. And, paralysis, sorry, you can jump in after. Of course, paralysis, just wanted to mention that it's always a huge theme in Dubliners and throughout the entirety of the short story collection.
Okay, so what I was going to previously mention, there's this theory that Lenehan was actually in love romantically with Coralie, which is why he put up with Coralie's very dominant personality, because he was just in love with him. And
we know this because of how he viewed the maid. It's like very masculine, calling the maid like handsome and things like that. Yeah.
I don't entirely agree with it. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. I think that Lenehan is just going along with it because it's what he sees as something he can do in his life to get money. Because we see him talking about how he wants this future life. We see it in the rhetorical questions that he says somewhere, where he's talking about having a wife and children and a normal life. But then at the end of the story, going back to that motif of the coin, you see them smiling and looking at the coin as if it's this huge thing and it's going to change their lives. And it kind of goes into the idea of them never changing. And I think in looking through the whole story with the themes of deception and mistrust, and how even from the beginning, it doesn't look like they truly trust each other, I don't really think it ties into the themes of like them having some type of romantic feeling for each other.
I feel like their relationship is more so of a conflict internally, because Lenehan is described to desire to escape his current situation, but he lacks like the motivation and the initiation to actually do this. He wants to escape, but he's stuck, and this being stuck is again like the paralysis metaphor.
Yeah.
And this kind of like being stuck in his situation shows how many people during Dublin during this period had a hard time leaving their borders because of the grading oppressive of the British that were right next door. So it kind of shows like how potentially Lenehan may feel like the Irish compared to Corley's British, how he feels like this internal struggle to follow him because that's the domineering power. That's the one who has all the power in like their relationship.
And it's also important to note that it's all transactional, right? Like you notice that when they're talking about their relationships with women, Corley's always saying, "Oh, she got me this, she got me that, she got me this." And ultimately the relationship he had with the woman was to be a transaction. The relationship they have with each other to an extent is transactional because in a way they're co-workers in these schemes that they play, right?
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I think we should move away from Coralie and Lenehan and talk a little bit more about the motif of walking and how they're always walking around. Does anyone want to jump in and talk about that?
Yes, yes. So I'd say that the motif of them walking around and like these various street names, it's kind of like they don't have any sense of direction on where they're going in life. They're extremely lost. And yeah, so like the British are dominant over the Irish.
So in this time period, I think what Rose is trying to get into is that because the British had rule over Ireland, the Irish people kind of lost their identity. And they were kind of wandering, in a sense, trying to find themselves and wandering under British rule. And Ireland was stagnant under British rule because of it. And the motif of walking, these characters walking around and having no sense of direction in their life, is a representation for Ireland itself and their stagnation, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess I can jump in, and I do want to mention the harp that like
Yes,
the
that's an
harp
important one.
yeah, that they encountered when they were just walking around. It just like the moon, I guess it's a way of like representing how, you know, they're going down a dark path, but not just any dark path, kind of like a dark path using women, since they feminize the harp. And yeah,
The conversation becomes kind of sexual too, right?
yeah,
In the way that the harp is being described as if like her clothing had fallen off and she was being touched by the hands of this person. And it kind of shows how they themselves view women as something to take advantage of, whether that's through transactions, through money, financially, or maybe even it kind of implies maybe that at least Lenehan, because he is our third person narrator, has potentially even taken advantage of women sexually. And that kind of comes back when he is following Coralie with this woman and the kind of predatory nature of how he does it and how he seems to know how to follow women around without being noticed, right?
yeah.
So add on what you were saying, Alexa. Previously, when Lenehan and Coralie were going to meet up with this woman, Lenehan actually wanted to see the woman with his own two eyes to make sure that she was actually real. So this goes to show the type of untrustworthy relationship that they have between each other, as Lenehan was doubting his friend. This shows how Lenehan truly has absolutely no trust in his friend Coralie.
Yeah.
And they're both working together trying to achieve their goal of being able to receive some form of compensation for what they're doing, because ultimately that's their main goal. They see women as mere objects, that they can use to make money. That's pretty much all that they care about in the story.
And I would also like to mention how, based off the archetypal literary theory, characters can be like divided into different tropes, I would say. And Corley is kind of characterized to be a trickster, since he's kind of the devious one between the two. He's like the one that more so controls Lenehan. And it's kind of really enforcing the ironicness of the title to Gallants, and how overall they're the opposite of chivalrous. And in the end, they actually go for the coin. And the coin kind of symbolizes this meaning of materialism and how they'll never really achieve anything meaningful, only material in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that sounds like a good place to end.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure. Yes. Okay.
Because we are talking about Lenehan and Coralie and kind of like how men are like using, but we also have to remember that the maid is also using her employer, and we kind of get a hint of how she like could really be like in her description of what she's wearing. She's wearing a blue skirt and a white blouse, and on top we have this black leather jacket. It kind of like, you know, blue, white, Virgin Mary colors, and just like this negative black on top of it, kind of like hiding her, or like putting a mask over her innocence. And, you know, obviously we see that at the end.
Like it's tainted.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the two characters are the leech to her white and blueness.
Yeah, that could be it. I mean, I just think that overall, it's kind of just like how the British are oppressing the Irish so much that they're gonna have to do whatever they can to live. They're gonna have to steal from their boss. They might have to use their family members, and these men might have to use these women. So, yeah.
And I think with that, we've covered everything from the two gallants. So we'll come back next time in a week, right?
A rating for the story, what would you guys give it out of 10?
I'd probably give like a 5.
I would give it 7. I quite like it in comparison to the other ones that we've looked at. I feel like I would give this more.
I would give this like an 8 out of 10. It's definitely one of the more interesting stories that we've covered so far, in my opinion.
I would recommend to all viewers reading this or watching this, I mean. Well, I would give the story overall a 7 out of 10, but I would recommend continue reading Dubliners, the book in general, because the continuing stories, especially the story The Dead, would really help in your analysis of future literary works from
yes, and we're gonna be going over that one next week.
Next week.
Absolutely.
If you have questions on it, you can come back to it next week. And once we finish with our entire series, you can come back to any of the videos for any literary questions you may have.
You know where to find us. Right here.
YouTube, Spotify, and Apple playlists. Bye.
Bye. Until next time.